Hello, this is part of my series called Digital Freedoms, where I'm sharing my experiences of providing client website services in order to fund a free living digital nomad lifestyle. In this one, I wanted to talk a little bit about eating out as a digital nomad. Over the 8 years since I became a nomad, there's been quite a transition from thinking like a tourist to thinking as I do now as a nomad. Many of the places, particularly in Asia, that I now regularly visit, I spent time there as a tourist, and I like similar things. I like finding cheap eats, eating the local food, but I did blend that in with places that I felt safe with, places that served the regular Western food that I was used to or associated with eating out. So they could include pastas, pizzas, burgers, that kind of thing. And, there was much I loved about it initially and still do. Eating outside is something that we don't get to do too much in London. And the fact that I could quite comfortably cover the bill for a group was always quite nice. But what I did find, even though I felt everything was cheap, when I come back from these holidays, I generally would overspend. And when I became a nomad, I'd quit my job. I carried on really with that same mentality, enjoyed it as a holiday, still continued eating out on a daily basis, which of course I wouldn't have done in London. But the money was coming in, at least initially. It was only sort of later, after the first year, that I started to think really more about how much freedom we kind of had. So if our income were to dry up, how long would our savings in the bank last us? What was the sort of cheapest we could live on? Just so I could know how much I would need to compromise myself in terms of the kind of work I'd need to do for an income. So we already knew that we were not going about things as cheaply as we could do. We could cook more, or we could go to places where there weren't so many Westerners in Asia. So we were questioning whether we were either just keeping up our standards, what we wanted to do, or were we being actually wasteful. Whether we should, while we're traveling more, whether we should be looking for more fully equipped apartments so they had kitchens and we could do more cooking, or whether that time spent doing the shopping or doing the cooking was really actually worth it, considering what we would relatively charge for our income and our desire to have more free time, which is what this was all about. I think the best answer we came up with, and I think it's probably the best answer for most of these questions, is follow the locals. If you want to understand how to best live in any country, is to kind of look at what they do. And that's our kind of default for learning a place. We'll try and find out where it is that the real locals go and kind of mimic what it is that they do. And of course, that's going to vary. If we're traveling through the West or in Europe, chances are that locals are going to have more supermarkets and cook at home. They're going to be easier to find a supermarket. So we will probably then, in that case, make sure that we've got an apartment and the cooking facilities. Where we're in Asia, where it kind of seems to me that almost every 10th household has been turned into a makeshift takeaway or a restaurant, well, then we're more likely to stay in rooms and go out on regular little trips exploring what is out there. And we absolutely love doing that in most Asian places. So to get to that, though, looking for kind of cheaper meals, local meals, we had to sort of adjust a bit. So first was getting out of the comfort zone. So I'm somebody who's quite happy to jump into the unknown if I need to entirely change my life. But on the day-to-day, I tend to stick to the safe and familiar. My wife's not like that. She's quite happy to wander down some back streets to find some local restaurants where nothing's in English, no one speaks English, the food isn't too familiar, or the process to get or eat that food isn't familiar. She will just jump in. She doesn't have the hang up like I do about kind of social etiquette. And they're trying to sell something as she sees it. We can buy that stuff. They're going to accommodate us. We'll work it out what to do. And she's so right, that does work out, and it's some of the best events that ever happened to us. I mean, the worst that happens is that we just amuse the locals, but we can laugh at ourselves, so that's always quite good fun. Or we come away with a dish that we weren't expecting, that we didn't like, but again, it's very memorable and we learn a lot from that. So we definitely dive in a lot more with this. Food safety is something that I used to be concerned about because I was a chef. So I used to know the practices, and some of the practices for handling food in Asia are not what I expect. So now I turn a blind eye. We were covering for my sister-in-law's tour around India, where she was taking some people from the UK, and they reminded me again how conscious people are, and I was, about picking kind of safe places. In reality now, most of our dishes, when we stay long-term in Goa, come from a kind of locals restaurant that we go to. And the prices are cheaper, but the place looks a bit of a state. The kitchen looks terrible. It's cleaner now, but it used to look very dirty, and I just turned a blind eye to it and carried on eating there. Never had any problems. 3 times I've had problems, which real food poisoning. First one, and the worst, was the UK, where I wasn't expecting it. Second was India, but it was a 5-star hotel. And the third I still don't know about. So that's just my experience. I think maybe I've toughened up over the time, but I think there's probably no avoiding this with food safety. So you might as well go for the kind of affordable local dishes, really. In terms of health, I think that's greatly improved for me for eating out. As a Westerner, I've had a lifetime being exposed to processed, doctored food that's made for mass consumption and made to last. And you know, when I was traveling, as well, as I mentioned, the pasta, pizza, burger type thing, that's what I associate with eating out. But, you know, thinking about it now, this kind of food isn't designed for nutrition. It's designed as an extra, a treat, something you do with your disposable income. So I think that's entirely different to most of the East, where many of the restaurants will grow up out of a need to share the cooking duties with the local community. And I think it still has, a lot of places still have their roots in that. There's still shops, but they're opened up for often the same locals going to them. And as a result, the food is designed for the family's health and nutrition. It's going to be fresh, it's going to be more balanced and sourced locally. So, you know, that's one of the real, I think health has been a real benefit of exploring what locals are eating and saving money in the meantime as well. Something I have noticed, it might just be me, is that when I do go to UK to spend a couple of months and maybe travel through bits of Europe, is that I so quickly put on weight, even though I seem to have less meals a day and still do my exercise. As soon as I get to Asia, I think overindulge, so I save money on our main dishes, but I do go out, particularly in Thailand, where there are lots of little places where you can get little sweets as well. In Vietnam, you can do this and blow the money there as well. But seem to lose the weight in these places. I can't quite figure that out. There was some adjusting as well for me to do, and I think it was well worth the time of just sticking to eating what locals do. When I was holidaying, I really didn't like the taste of lemongrass, which would blow out a lot of dishes in Thailand. I didn't like anything sort of spicy early on in the day, so that would blow out some of the nice Indian breakfasts that you could get. Now that has entirely changed. As we move around, I've become adapted to the areas, and I kind of yearn for the things that they have naturally and forget the things that I used to have. So, and I think that wouldn't have happened if we didn't get more experimental and just set to eating kind of local dishes. The downside of this is I do have a serious addiction to chili, so if I do spend any time in the West where it's not served up so well, I kind of start to feel ill if I don't have some chili. In the blog post that goes with this, I call this next section Everything for $1, which may be a slight exaggeration, but it's still pretty true and is what we often go for in terms of trying to look for these meals available to us. There are some difficulties always to finding these as well. You will find them in some places. The particular area that we go to Chiang Mai, very kind of local area compared to one where most of the digital nomads hang out, is very cheap for the locals, and that's very easy. Nearly all of the dishes that locals will have will that be that price. If moving around, it can be difficult. So say if we are in a real tourist place, so Pattaya or Phuket in Thailand, then most of what we're going to see near the places we're likely to stay are going to have their prices for exactly the same thing as you're going to find in Chiang Mai for maybe twice or even 4 times the price. So what we've learned as a little tip is to stalk the workers. So there's often, in those kind of places, lots of migrant workers from the same country going into work in those areas. Because they have a culture of eating out, they will have their own places. You can find out where they are, and the food will be just as good there, if not better. We also had a problem when we were in the Philippines. We were moving around quite a lot there, so we didn't get to know any one place and was struggling to find food. We could see this kind of small, again, local restaurants where there would be a whole bunch of trays with nice, tasty cooked food in it, all in nice sauces, lots of different things and variety. But, we'd go and look and it was cold. And we thought, okay, it's only for takeaway. That's what we saw a lot of people doing. As it turns out, this is kind of a regular thing that I've seen in many places. They would be serving that food up initially hot, so if you know the timing, that's fine. But you could still have it cold, because what they would do is they would provide you with rice. They've got that piping hot. They put the food on the top of it. It warms it up. They give you some soup or broth generally with these kind of meals, and they give you some drinking water. And you'll get this really big, healthy dish with lots of variety for $1. And that's really pretty much what we find in most of the places. We did learn, and only recently, to start watching timings of things. So we've been to Vietnam. I think this was our 4th time recently. We decided to spend 3 months in Da Nang by the beach and learn. And it took us about 2 of those months to work out how to get the food that we kind of like, those similar foods where we get a nice big rice dish with lots of tasty different cooked food. We learned something about timings in the morning. So Vietnam, I think, generally as a country, if I'm judging by our other trips, but certainly in Da Nang, the early risers getting up at 5 o'clock, going on the beach, doing some exercises, and they would tend to eat some of what I would consider evening food in the morning. So one thing that I really like, bakar, which is like a kind of beef stew. You can get this with some nice baguettes, because that's what they tend to have in Vietnam because of the French influence. And it makes a really nice, healthy morning food. So we've learned to go there. These places will be open very, very early, and most of them will be closed at 10, so we were missing those. And there's lots of other cooked food that you can have for a really nice breakfast. And the same again for the evening. There was a whole bunch of places which we entirely missed, which would open at about 6:30. Again, these trays of dishes with rice and the broth. And the locals knew to go at these times. It would get very, very busy as people come through, serving them very quickly, but be closed by about 8 o'clock, so we're mostly missing them. So we've learned a lot more to look out for the timings and where people go if we want to get those kind of nice, healthy, cheap dishes. Another tip is to learn to look out for, perhaps if you're renting rooms because you're in Asia and you don't need a kitchen, you're going to eat out, you might skip over some of the food markets, but often they can be more like food halls. They'll have little stalls. People will take away cooked food, but people also sit round in benches around the stall itself. And we had a great time in Da Nang with our local there. It had some great sweets, which we used to get. We used to get a kembo, which was kind of avocado, and it had a nice coconut ice cream and some little chips of coconut, sweet coconut on the top. Lovely. But we would go there for other kind of food as well. A lot of sort of fresh stuff that you'd wrap up in spring rolls. Hard to understand what to select to make up a meal. Hard to know how to eat it, but you just have to dive in, and it was fabulous. There would always be some perhaps school children, but you were a novelty. People looked after you because there were no other Westerners going to these places, and if you came back again, of course, it was a really nice atmosphere. And I think that's the thing about what I've learned, is going to these places and not knowing what you're doing and just hoping for the best and ordering it and working it out and hoping other people will, just gives you a wonderful experience. I think most people in the world are lovely people, and I think you get exposed to a different type of person if you're right at the center of tourism, where you meet, particularly in Asia, really lovely people in their natural environment. And when you're kind of unique to it, it's a great fun. So I really enjoyed that. In terms of food hall, another couple of quick tips, something for us to work out further. In Singapore, that's quite an expensive place to stay and eat as well compared to other places in Asia. They do a lot of food halls where the food is very cheap price as well there. Particularly if you see in a food hall a stall that has a lot of dishes and they're serving people quickly and there's no prices up, It's almost the reverse of if you need to ask the price, you can't afford it. Well, this is the opposite. If you need to ask the price in those places, you certainly can, because they tend to be the cheapest places. So look out for that if you're in Singapore. Suvarnabhumi Airport in Bangkok, they have, and it's the same as the other airport, Dong Muang, they have a food hall, a food court that we just never found for a long time. It serves up at the regular prices, lots of healthy Thai dishes and lots of other things that you can get there. It's a great place. It seems almost that only the staff seem to know about it. It is very busy. Absolute great find, and I'm going to look out for other things like that as well in Asia, because I really hate being in an airport where I might have to buy kind of rubbish food at a great expense. So that was a real find. Anyway, that's our tips. In reality, our lives are not all about just saving the money on it. It's about getting some healthy food and finding out what the prices are. We constantly blow our budgets anyway, because anything we're likely to save there, we spend it on kind of sweets if they're available, or the savings that we've made on the regular day-to-day living. Then we'll just fund going to some of the great places you can go to. So there's fabulous eat all you like seafood buffets that have fantastic seafood in places like Thailand, and other places where there'll be hotel buffets where you can get great selection of worldwide food. So we often blow our money on that. Anyway, I'd be very interested in hearing any tips that you've picked up. I hope this has been useful to someone, and I hope to see you again in another video. If you like this, then please give me a thumbs up on YouTube, or consider subscribing to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.